Hey there, everyone. This is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Phantom Perspectives. Hopefully, uploaded on Friday this time. I'd like to apologize for last week's for how late the last week's vlog was. It was supposed to be up on Friday, but our Wi-Fi was wonky here that day, and by the time everything was resolved, I kind of just got lazy and didn't upload it till later. So it's partly Wi-Fi's fault, partly my fault. So again, apologies in advance. This should be up on Friday, hopefully, but yeah. Anyway, today we're going to be discussing episode 32 of Danny Phantom Micromanagement. And this episode, and in this episode, the presidential fitness test is happening in Casper High. And unfortunately, Danny and Tucker are kind of the least qualified to actually successfully pass it, and as such, they're technically bringing their class down, but they're bringing down the average grade for the class. As such, their gym teacher decides that the best way to get them into shape is to assign each of them what she calls a fitness buddy. Tucker ends up getting Sam to be his fitness buddy, but Danny ends up getting stuck with Dash as his fitness buddy. And the only reason Dash agrees to do it is because if he doesn't, his grade will suffer too. However, at the same time this is happening, Skulker attacks again. Danny managed to beat him. Does manage to beat him and send him back to the Ghost Zone, but Danny made a comment about him relying on his natural abilities, and Tucker and Skulker, instead of actually deciding to do that, instead just makes improvements to his suit to kind of make him a much better hunter. In order to properly catch Danny. As such, he goes after Danny again while he and Dash are supposed to be training, and in the debacle, Danny has to, and when he appears, Danny has to pretend that he's scared so that he can run away, and then go ghost while Dash isn't looking. However, at the same time, Danny's dad actually managed to create a new piece of technology. This one's supposed to be called, I think, the Fenton Crammer. I don't know, but pretty much it's a shrink ray. Pretty much whatever you shoot it at will shrink, and as such, when he hears Danny yelling for help, he thinks this is a golden opportunity to play with his new toy. And so when Danny goes ghost and fights Skulker, Jack ends up looks out the window and shoots both Danny and Skulker with the shrink ray, and then he shoots Dash too. My guess is he got confused, or he was just an idiot, or maybe he wanted to get rid of witnesses. I don't know. Bottom line, the end result is that Danny, Skulker, and Dash are now shrunk, and unfortunately, the only way they can get reversed to this is if they find the Crammer and unshrink them. But there are however, there's a problem, and that's a very big one. Because it's a piece of Fenton technology, of course the shrinker is supposed to created to hunt ghosts, and a side effect of Danny and Skulker being shrunk is that unfortunately their powers are shorting out. Now for Skulker, it's not a big issue because he has a suit, so while he can't phase through objects or whatever, he can still rely on the suit to fly, shoot, and attack. But unfortunately, as the more Danny is shrunk, the more his powers start to short out. First his flight goes, then his intangibility, then he can't shoot ectoblasts, and then at one point he even loses his ability to possess people, as in the whole debacle that he and Dash try and get away, end up running into a mouse hole. And so when Danny and Dash are cornered between the mouse and Skulker, Danny briefly possesses the mouse to fight Skulker until he gets thrown out rather easily because of his shorting powers. As such, Danny tells Dash Danny convinces Dash that they need to work together. And again, keep in mind that Dash does not know that Danny Phantom and Danny Fenton are one and the same. He doesn't know that. And so Danny and Dash decide to work together to help get up to Fenton Works, but even then they're still kind of on a time limit it's still shorting out Danny's powers, and as such he's gradually being restored to his human form little by little. As like for starters, his boots turn back into his regular shoes, and his pants turn into his jeans. And something I kind of like too is that when his shirt kind of comes back, rather than it being his regular shirt, it's a black shirt with the Danny Phantom logo on it. I think which I thought that was cool. But in the meantime, Skulker is still stalking them. Being shrunk doesn't really matter to him. He still wants to go after Danny, and he can still adapt to all this stuff because he's a hunter and he still has a suit. So he begins just chasing Danny and Dash throughout the whole episode, and it's just kind of how the rest of the episode goes. Just Danny and Dash trying to outwit Skulker, doing everything they can to try and to stay one step ahead of him and so forth. In the meantime, and just kind of getting exercise. Essentially like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, only with superheroes and ghosts, so. But, as such, I really can't. I think it really pretty much just sums up the rest of the plot because it kind of goes the rest of how you would think it would go. They do get unshrunken. Because all the physical fitness Danny performed, he passed the test, and Tucker ended up passing the test too because Sam bribed him with a fake PDA of a newer model, but and the more she tried luring him to get it, the more he worked out. So that still worked out, but yeah. On the whole, though, it was actually a pretty good episode, though. But on the whole, though, it was a pretty good episode. Again, it was just another example of a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids type scenario, as Danny and and on top of that, it's also kind of meant to be kind of a humbling factor because in the beginning of the episode, Danny wondered why he had to worry about the presidential fitness test when he had superpowers, which again is kind of a regular teen kid mindset to have, which I think is nice. Which I think is kind of funny. But then, of course, since the Fenton Ghost Crammer is supposed to be anti-ghost, his powers are slowly shorting out, and so not only does he of course he has to rely on his own physical abilities. And on top of that, he has to try and work with Dash, who even when shrunk is a moron and a douche. Like not towards Danny Phantom because he's the big superhero and everything, but he takes pot. But like. I think a perfect example of his stupid jock mindset. Actually, two examples is one when they go into the mouse hole, he's shocked at how abysmal it looks because it does look like a mouse hole. It's a hole in the wall, and yet for some reason he thought that there would be like little furniture made up of a yarn or cheese and whatever, and pretty much, and then of course. Which even Danny makes a comment about. And another example is that when they do think they manage to escape from Skulker, and they're in the kitchen, Dash just has a giant freak out because he's now small and what he considers puny, and that, which I admit being shrunk probably would kind of get that reaction, but he seemed to be doing well until he started saying he was small and puny. He just said he didn't like being puny, which yeah. The episode doesn't really do much to endear us to him. He's still just kind of a doofus and a moron. And he doesn't, and of course he doesn't really. Of course, while he likes working with Danny Phantom, he still makes it quite clear that he still is kind of a douche to Danny Fenton. At one point while Danny and Dash are running away. They find themselves on one of those little fake golf courses that people set up, or in this case, Jack set up. And Danny says the only safe place they can hide is the hole, and that's because Jack sucks at it because he just wails on the balls and they just go everywhere but the hole. And of course, and Dash says, "Wow, does everyone in this family suck at sports?" Which kind of gets Danny a little. And then after they both get unshrunk later at the end of the episode, Dash says, "Hey, why don't we just wait around here for a while? And then when Danny Fenton shows up, we both wail on him." Which Danny just shrinks him out of spite. So yeah, there's nothing really expanded on Dash's character in this episode. It's just Danny having to try and work with Dash, and of course Dash is more than willing to work with Danny Phantom because he's this big time superhero. So yeah, it's really kind of yeah. I still but nothing really expands the relationship between the two. Like it's not like the Spider-Man Flash dynamic, like kind of going to that, actually using that as an example. And when it comes to the Spider-Man Flash dynamic, Flash Thompson does actually have a genuine, in most media I've seen, Flash Thompson does have a genuine respect for Spider-Man and what he does. It's not just not just a fanboy. He genuinely believes Spider-Man is a good person and is willing to help whenever and is willing to help out. For example, like in the Spectacular Spider-Man show, in the episode where the Chameleon was masquerading as Spider-Man, he was one of the few people that stood up for Spider-Man and who stood up for Spider-Man. And actually, kind of going through the whole symbiote arc, I'm going to just use that as an example to kind of mirror this. When it came down to Spectacular Spider-Man, I feel like it kind of gave him depth, kind of gave Flash depth without taking away his bully status, as he's one of the few people that actually believed that Spider-Man was innocent when the Chameleon was masquerading as him. And then later on in that arc, as the symbiote was making Peter act more and more like a jerk, he was the one that gave Peter the wake-up call, even telling him that if you're ditching your friends, and that proves you're still stuck up. Can't you? Guy who's too stupid to realize his friends are just trying to help. Which I think it added layers, but yeah, once it was all over and Peter thanked him, he did say don't mention it, but then he says, and I mean not to anyone, which again goes back, which added layers to him. Here though, there's not really many layers added to Dash. He just works with Danny because he's a big time superhero and they need to work together. And at the end of it, while Danny is glad to have worked with him, I don't think their relationship has really improved, so to speak. Maybe a little, maybe somewhat, but at the end of the day, he and Danny are still not really friends, so to speak. And Dash makes it perfectly clear that he still doesn't like Danny and still thinks of him as a punching bag. So yeah. But yeah, it still is a nice little Honey, I Shrunk the Kids type of episode. With some nice little moments where Danny and Dash having to work together. I liked them being chased by Skulker and having to evade him, and while using their wits and their physical prowess. There actually are some nice jokes here and there, and I actually do kind of like them. And part of what can make these types of episodes work is that they can make like normal household objects into something terrifying. For example, there was one. Going back to when Danny and Dash were in the kitchen, Jazz was walking around doing exercises, and then when she took a break, she shook sweat off of herself, and of course, for anybody else, it's nothing, but for them, that was dangerous. That was dangerous, and yeah, that actually is kind of nice. Also, another thing I liked is just a nice little bit of Chekhov's gun. There's a nice little Chekhov's gun in the episode, as earlier on in the episode when because Jack had the Fenton Crammer in the little. And the Fenton Works' his little satellite thing, their attic, I suppose. I forgot what it was called. Sorry. I think I might have known it once, but I don't know it right now. Can't recall it. But he was having pizza at the time, and then when he heard Danny calling for help, he put a slice of pizza he was about to eat down, but it was hot, so it would drip. So you saw it drip down. So when Danny and Dash get up to that lab to find the Crammer, they managed to use that dripping cheese to climb up on the table and get to it, which is nice. Which is a nice little bit of checkup. Which is just nice. So yeah, but yeah, on the whole though, it was a pretty good episode. Nothing really was advanced for it when it came to Nothing was really advanced. Nothing really advanced for it when it came to like Danny and his friends, but it had some nice humor. The plot was still nice. It had plenty of good action. And I actually do like that. And I do admit, I do kind of like the tension of Danny slowly losing his powers and having to make sure that Dash didn't see enough of him losing his powers to put two and two together. So I kind of like that. It adds a nice bit of tension to it, as he is kind of on a timer here. So yeah, on the whole, good episode. Pretty good episode. So. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. Hopefully this video comes out on Friday, and if it does, I will see you next week. Take care.